How's it going, everyone? This is Kevin. Today I want to bring along with me to give you my ultimate final review on the Tamron 50-400mm. So let's jump right into it. If you haven't followed along to see me testing out this lens for sports photography, wildlife, landscapes, portraits, I can fully encourage you to check out those videos that were released previously before this one if you want to get to see these more in action. This video is more about my experience with the lens, who it could be for and what you could use it for, and my pros and cons when it comes down to this telephoto lens. So the Tamron 50-400 is a nice telephoto lens for the price point. This lens comes in at $12.99, which is a great range of price point for what you're getting out of a lens. This lens gives you that 50 at 4.5 all the way to 400, kind of changing into the 6.3, which can let you do a lot of things when it comes down to a versatile zoom lens with the telephoto kick. One of the things that I used it for mainly was using it for sports photography for my tennis academy and for portraits. I attempted to do some wildlife photography and landscape, but I wasn't obviously having to do too much with the landscape and wildlife since there's not really much to see around my area. We don't have cool mountains either, but I did with what I had and did the best that I could to showcase some examples in previous videos. But when it comes down to this lens, I'm going to just kind of tell you the pros when it comes down to what I loved about it and something that I wish could change more of it to see if it's something that, makes sense for you in the future to get. The first thing I did with this lens whenever I was able to get it loaned from me by Tamron, I use it for portraits. Now, for me, I do a lot of portraits. I use my 35-150 because you can get that f2 to 2.8, which I truly love. With this one, it's a 4.5 going up to that 6.3, so it's not a horrible thing, but it also is, you giveth and you taketh, because the price point for this compared to the 35-150 and what you can use it for, kind of like comparing apples to oranges. So it got me curious to know if the 4.5 to 6.3 having a 50-400 would maybe be something enticing for some people that want to do more portraits and have that nice compression. I thought it was going to be actually horrible with the 6.3 because you feel like you're not going to get a good, bokeh and blurred background, but because you're shooting that telephoto compression all the way in the 200 to 400 range, you get that nice compression, which is fairly nice when it comes down to portraits because it just makes it just look, you don't have to worry about the background too much and it makes everything look just nice and close and tight. And I really enjoyed that about this lens. Granted, the downfall of that section with portraits was knowing that you had to have more light and also have to crank up that ISO, which if you're doing portraits, you're fine because you can lower your shutter speed as long as your model is not moving so much. So you're kind of fine with that aspect. So that was kind of like a little drawback that I thought of this lens, especially because I've been used to my Tamron 35-150 with that f2 to 2.8, a little bit spoiled in that aspect, just to have a little bit more softer look for me. That's something that I truly enjoy with that. But overall, I still thought that this was a great lens for portraits. I thought it was something really great for the price point. At $12.99, you get a good range. So if you're wanting to do more telephoto type of portraits and more maybe headshots or something like that, this is something really great to have. The video, even when it came down to portraits, was still really good. I thought it was really great. It kept up with the autofocus and everything. So for that being it, I think it was a really great lens when it came down to just being able to use for photo and video for portraits. The same thing when it came down to the sports photography, I thought it was really fast to kind of keep tracking of the subject and taking the photos and everything. I used it with the kids in my tennis academy. They might not be moving as much, but they are moving fairly around in the area. They're not having to chase, a ball back and forth like in a basketball court or maybe football or soccer, but you still have that sense of, motion that you can do. And with that said, I still had to use it with a little bit low light capabilities with my Sony a7 IV, mainly because we are outside and as the light goes away and then we turn on the lights inside the tennis courts aren't always the brightest as it would be like at a, let's say, basketball court or something like that. If you're in a little basketball stadium inside for like a high school or something like that, you have more light. So you're able to crank up the ISO, not have that grainy of shot. So that's something that's kind of beneficial, especially because you're shooting at probably in the 5.6 to like 6.3 range most of the time if you're zooming in anyway. So you're not going to have that, blurred background as much, but you're getting that separation still. It's never going to be as good as a prime lens. So obviously if you're wanting to compare it to like a 1.8 or something something, it's not really gonna be that. So like I know some people have like the 135, like I think it's like 1.8 by Sony, or the 105 by Sigma that's like a 1.4 or something. I can't even remember that one. But so it's not gonna have that cool separation and the compression, but you still can do a lot with this lens, even for sports photography, because that 400 range, getting zoomed in, is just really great if you have to be farther away. But if you're not gonna have to be too far away, you still have that 50 range to like the 100, where it still gets that nice compression, but you're not having to, you know, be worried that you won't have enough wideness compared to having, let's say, a 150 to 500. And as well with the video capabilities for it, using it in like relatively low light for sports, worked out perfectly, and I thought it was great. Like I said, my main gripe is just more not having a lower f-stop, to maybe have it like a 2.8 to like a 5.6. That way it gives you a little bit more room to not have to over crank your ISO. But with most modern cameras, you're kind of fine with cranking up that ISO, and a lot of the post editing, you can get away with it, so it's not that horrible. And now ultimately for wildlife / landscapes, that's something that I know some people tend to use a telephoto lens for. Like I said, this is a great range for the 400 range, but even for me, when I was out there and I would see a bird in the distance, I would zoom in all the way to 400 and wasn't able to really get to them. So if you're the type of person that needs that extra range, this probably won't be the lens for you. But if you're fine to maybe camp out and wait out, because I didn't have the luxury to really have the patience to wait it out, you can just camp out and just, you know, wait, set up, maybe put a little bit of feed so that the animals come closer to you, because the 400 range is just really great anyway. I think you'd be perfectly fine. You might not have those big lenses that those people have for wildlife, but at the end of the day, this is not that either. This is more like an entry-level telephoto type of lens that you could get really good quality out of it for a great price point of $12.99. You're not spending the $5,000 and above range to get those big lenses that you would have for like a sports photographer at the NFL or soccer or anything like that, or maybe shooting for, you know, Discovery Channel for some animal stuff, you know, who knows. But at the end of the day, I think it still does a great job for that. So shooting even landscapes kind of style, you can target that one section that you want to target by zooming in or zooming out, whatever you want to do, and you have a good range. So for that, it's kind of hard to beat it. I think, in all honesty, I think you'd be fine with the 50 to 400 if you're trying to do more landscape and wildlife photography, especially if you're getting started out. This lens will pack a punch, and it'll be really great to pair up with a Sony a7 IV, because you have that bird autofocus, that animal autofocus, and also the human, so you get to do a lot more with it. So it's a really great scenario. I mean, I used it with ducks, nothing too crazy, but it would lock into their eye and everything. So that was the coolest thing, because you're seeing it work and it gets that sharpness around the eye and everything, so that everything just looks really good and sharp. So for me, that was really great. I'm not that much of a wildlife photographer or even that much into extreme landscapes, because we don't have them as much around me. But if you're into that and want to get more into it, this is a great starting point in my honest opinion, because for $12.99 you're getting a really great lens, and it's a little bit hefty, but you would expect that obviously from a telephoto type of lens. So just keep that in mind. I mean, I'm used to it because of my 35 to 150. I have it over here, you know, hanging out. So I mean, comparison like that, you know, it's a little bit bigger, but it's not the end of the world. So who might this lens be for? Let's cover that real quick. I think if you're wanting to get more into a lens that can kind of get you some nice portraitures, but also maybe some sports photography, and if you want to get slightly slowly and steady into wildlife, this is perfect. For portraits, you're great because you're covering that nifty 50 section and that 85 range. And even if you go into the more telephoto side of the lens, you still get that nice compression and you get some cool photos and just different styles and vibes from it. So that for me alone is a great lens if you're wanting to get more into it. You might not have the prime section, how they have with the 1.8 and stuff like that, but you're also not having to get multiple lenses. And until you kind of figure out what focal range you might want, this would be a perfect grade to start. And now if you're maybe wanting to do maybe sports photography for your school or anything to dive into, maybe for eventually getting more bigger into it, you get a great range with this so that you can be up close and personal or from a little bit farther away. So it's just a great situation nonetheless. And like I said, if you're wanting to be somewhat of a wildlife photographer with landscape, this will get you covered for everything. I mean, you obviously need a higher f-stop anyway for those types of shots because you want to have more of it in focus. You're not having to worry so much about the bokeh in the background being so, like, I guess, creamy. You want to have some separation, and that compression gives it to you, but you also have that nice sharpness that you're guaranteed to make sure that everything is looking, you know, in focus rather than just one section be in focus and the rest becomes a little bit too soft. So that's pretty much it for who I would think with this lens would be. If you're wanting to dive into it, go for this kind of lens if you're not sure what range you want to go with. If you don't have the money to go and buy, let's say, 3 different lenses, this is a great starting point for $12.99 for that upper range for like in the telephoto range. Obviously, if you're wanting to get something with more versatility, I think having like a 28-75 by Tamron is pretty great, or the 24-70s from other companies are still great ranges because you have that wideness, but also a little bit of the telephoto. But if you already know that you're wanting to get a little bit more telephoto, I would honestly say to just go with something like this style, or look into the 150-500 range, because there are different types of lenses by Tamron. Even Sigma has some, but for me, I was lucky enough that Tamron was kind enough to lend me this lens, and I really enjoyed using it. So I think this is a cool little lens to start getting into more of that telephoto range, because I've only shot up to 180 before because I had the 70-180. So now I'm excited to eventually get even further than the 400, just because I want to attempt to do more wildlife, just because I thought it was cool. And I always love seeing those photos. So who knows, maybe eventually I'll get into that spectrum and try it out myself, and maybe see if they have anything further out with the range that Tamron comes out with that I could test out. But with all that said and done, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, share this video with a friend. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.